head coach does not simply vanish in the middle of an international tournament. It defies the logic of high-stakes competition. Coaches don't ghost their own bench, leaving a huddle of bewildered players and support staff without an explanation, unless something seismic has occurred behind closed doors. The silence that follows such an absence is often louder than any press conference, filled with the unspoken truths of power struggles, bruised egos, and organizational panic. Yet that is precisely what transpired with Cara Lawson, the head coach of Team USA during the FIBA World Cup qualifying tournament in Puerto Rico. The situation became even more explosive given the backdrop of her controversial handling of the sport's biggest phenomenon, Caitlyn Clark. With 3 games left in a crucial tournament that would set the tone for the World Cup cycle, Lawson was suddenly, inexplicably gone. In her place, Nate Tibbetts, the head coach of the WNBA's Phoenix Mercury, a man with no prior official role on the staff, was running the Team USA sideline, calling timeouts and making substitution decisions as if he had been there all along. What changed in those critical hours? What was said in the locker room after the final buzzer of a frustrating game? What conversations happened in hushed tones in the front office corridors? Conversations that led to head coach being removed without a single official statement from USA Basketball. The central, lingering question that the internet analysts and fans have been dissecting is this: did Cara Lawson sabotage Caitlyn Clark? Was this a case of a coach's philosophy clashing so violently with a generational talent that the organization had to choose a side? To understand the disappearance, we must first understand the plan that was in place going into the tournament, a plan that from the very first tip-off seemed designed to contain rather than unleash the most exciting player in women's basketball. That plan had Caitlyn Clark, a player whose mere presence alters the geometry of the court, coming off the bench. In 4 out of the 5 games of the group stage, Clark was not a starter. This was not a temporary adjustment or a strategic wrinkle to manage foul trouble. It was a foundational decision that would shape the team's identity or lack thereof. Let's set the scene with Game 1 against Senegal. The arena in Puerto Rico is buzzing. Clark checks in not as a starter but as a reserve. She plays limited, sporadic minutes, a rhythm-killing insertion that would frustrate any player of her caliber. But Clark is not any player. In those fractured minutes, she did the impossible. She didn't just play well, she shattered 5 FIBA world records in a single game. She posted the highest assist total ever recorded by a USA debutante in a FIBA qualifying game. Records that had stood for decades, untouched by generations of talented players, were erased in one night by a 22-year-old who hadn't even been deemed worthy of a starting spot. The basketball world took notice. Social media erupted. The expectation was that this performance would force a recalibration. Surely you cannot bench a player who just rewrote the record book in a single outing. Surely the coaching staff would see the undeniable. Cara Lawson's response? She put Clark back on the bench for the next game. The offense in those first 2 games under Lawson was a study in self-imposed limitations. It was slow, deliberate, and painfully methodical. It was a half-court slog, with veterans laboriously handling the ball, running sets that devoured 20 seconds off the shot clock before a shot was even attempted. The pace was that of a team that was trying not to lose, rather than a team trying to run an opponent off the floor. There is a specific philosophy behind this approach, and its chief architect on the staff was Stephanie White. White, who is both the head coach of the Indiana Fever, Caitlyn Clark's WNBA team, and a Team USA assistant, has been publicly open about her philosophy regarding Clark. She wants Clark to play slower, to operate off the ball, to be more controlled. She wants Clark to fit into a system, to become a cog in a pre-existing machine, rather than allowing Clark's unique genius to become the system. This philosophy, born perhaps of a desire for structure and defensive stability, was strangling the team's offensive potential. The offense under Lawson ground along, functional but uninspired. Clark would rotate in, create a spark, and then rotate back out. The team was winning, but nobody was lighting anything on fire. It was a team performing at 60% capacity, and the cause was right there on the bench. Picture this: you have a player who just shattered 5 world records while playing a backup role. Your offense is moving at half speed, a relic of a bygone era of basketball. Your starting guards are running sets that kill the clock, allowing defenses to set up and rest. And your best decision-maker in transition, the player who sees the floor 2 seconds ahead of the defense, is sitting down. That is not a coaching philosophy. It's a puzzle assembled with the wrong pieces in the wrong spots. Clark's game is built on pace and preternatural reads. When you slow that down, you don't just limit Clark, you make the entire offense worse. You give defenses time to set, to communicate, to take away driving lanes and passing angles. The early box scores told the story. The team was functional but never explosive, never finding that rhythm where the opponent just cannot keep up. Then came the game against Puerto Rico. This was the tipping point, the moment where the simmering frustration boiled over into a crisis. Clark's minutes were cut even further, a baffling decision given the team's offensive struggles. And the Puerto Rican coaching staff, seeing what the world saw, threw a defensive scheme at Clark that was a white flag of respect, a box end one. They dedicated an entire defender plus the help of the zone solely to taking Clark out of the game. It worked. Not because Clark is not good enough to beat it, she has destroyed box end ones her entire career, but because the offensive system around her had no answers. The other players, unaccustomed to the spacing and movement required to exploit a 4-on-3 advantage, looked stagnant. The team looked stuck. Commentators on the broadcast noted the dysfunction. Fans on social media were furious. If you watched that game, you felt it. A palpable sense that this wasn't working, a growing anger that seemed so obvious to everyone except the coaching staff on the sideline. But here is the statistical paradox that makes this entire saga so damning. Even through all of this, 4 games on the bench, a box-and-one scheme designed to erase her, a restrictive system built for a different style of play, Caitlyn Clark still led Team USA in plus-minus and efficiency for the entire tournament. Let that sink in for a moment. Despite coming off the bench for the majority of the tournament, despite playing in a system that neutered her primary strengths, despite facing the most aggressive defensive schemes thrown at any player on the floor, she outperformed every single one of her teammates in those 2 advanced categories. It doesn't stop there. She also led the asterisk entire tournament in both stats, every player from every country in the field. In the minutes she was allowed to play, she was the most impactful player in the entire competition. The data was irrefutable. After the Puerto Rico game, with the pressure mounting and the questions becoming unavoidable, Cara Lawson stepped up to the press conference microphone. A reporter asked her directly, point-blank, about Clark's limited role. It was a softball question, an opportunity to explain strategy, to praise the player's sacrifice, to provide any rationale that would ease the growing narrative. Lawson pivoted. She gave a non-answer about how everyone on Team USA should have a chance to shine. She did not mention the 5 world records Clark had broken. She did not address the puzzling minute restriction. She did not explain why her most efficient player was spending so much time on the bench. She simply deflected and moved on. That moment right there told you everything you needed to know about the dynamic. 5 world records broken, a team that was statistically better when Clark ran the offense, and the head coach would not even say her name when asked directly. It was an avoidance so transparent it became a story in itself. The press conference was a signal to the organization that the situation was beyond repair. And then just like that, Cara Lawson stopped showing up to games. Game 3 tips off, the players are announced, the anthem plays, and the ball is tossed in the air. But on the Team USA sideline, standing in a polo shirt, calling timeouts, drawing up plays, is Nate Tibbetts. Cara Lawson is simply not there. There was no announcement from USA Basketball, no press release, no vague statement about stepping away for personal reasons or a scheduling conflict. She was just gone, erased. The head coach of the United States women's national team had vanished into thin air in the middle of an international competition. To understand how abnormal this is, you have to appreciate the context. Nate Tibbetts is the head coach of the Phoenix Mercury. That is his full-time contracted job. He had no official role with Team USA heading into this tournament. He wasn't an assistant. He wasn't a consultant. He was a spectator. The fact that he is suddenly the guy with the clipboard running the huddle making substitution decisions is not just unusual, it is unprecedented. Coaches do not just wander onto international tournament sidelines because there was an open seat. Someone put him there. Someone made a frantic call. Someone in the upper echelons of USA Basketball decided that the situation was so untenable that a mid-tournament regime change was the only option. And USA Basketball said nothing. No update on Lawson's status. No explanation for the change, no reassurance to the players or the public, nothing. When an organization that prides itself on professionalism and order goes that quiet about something so visible, it usually means the answer is something they would rather not say out loud. The silence was a confession. So the internet, as it always does, went to work. Fans and analysts started pulling clips, lining up timelines, connecting the dots. And the dots were not hard to connect. Lawson disappeared right after the Puerto Rico game, right after that press conference where she refused to say Clark's name. Right after the Clark situation had escalated from a niche basketball debate into a full-blown national conversation about mismanagement, ego, and wasted generational talent. The rumors that began circulating were pretty direct. Sources close to the situation suggested that USA Basketball leadership looked at what was happening on the floor, looked at the growing media firestorm, and decided it was a problem they could not let continue. The Caitlyn Clark situation specifically had become a brand liability. An organization heading into a World Cup cycle did not want to be associated with a narrative of burying the sport's biggest star. Whether the final straw was the record-breaking performance from the bench, the evasive press conference, or something said in a heated behind-closed-doors conversation between players and staff, nobody was officially confirming any of it. But the timing makes it impossible to argue this was a coincidence. Cara Lawson was not on vacation, she was removed. And then Nate Tibbetts did something in his very first game that Cara Lawson had not done once across the previous 3 games. He put Caitlyn Clark in the starting lineup. That was his first move. It was a declaration, a philosophical reset. Clark started. Team USA beat New Zealand by 55 points, 55. Clark played 23 minutes, posting a quiet but devastating 14 points and 6 assists with 0 turnovers. But the box score didn't capture the real change. The offense looked nothing like what it had under Lawson. The pace was faster, a sprint instead of a crawl. The spacing was cleaner, with defenders forced to respect the 3-point line and the drive. Clark was pushing in transition, catching the defense off guard. Teammates were getting open looks early in the shot clock. The whole thing just flowed, a seamless rhythm that had been absent for 3 games. One coaching change, one decision to start Caitlyn Clark and run the offense through her, and the team went from grinding through box-and-one defenses to winning by 55 points. That is not a talent upgrade. The roster did not change. The players did not get better overnight. The system changed. Clark in the right system looks like a completely different player from Clark buried in the wrong one. Tibbetts also did not dodge questions about Clark after the game. He was straightforward, even enthusiastic about the approach. He talked about using guard-heavy lineups, with Clark running alongside Kelsey Plum and Paige Buchers, all of them operating in space, the ball moving and the pace up. He talked about Clark the way a coach talks about a player he actually wants on the floor. It was a noticeable, refreshing shift from the tense, evasive language of the previous press conferences. Look, nobody from USA Basketball is going to come out and say, "We fired Cara Lawson because she mishandled Caitlyn Clark." That is not how organizations talk. They hide behind philosophical differences and personal reasons. But the first decision Nate Tibbetts made as the de facto head coach tells you exactly what USA Basketball thought the problem was. Picture this: you take over a team mid-tournament, you have watched the film. You know exactly what has been going wrong, and one of the best floor generals in the history of the sport is sitting on your bench. What do you do first? Tibbetts' answer was simple and immediate. Start Clark, run the offense through her, let her see the floor and make decisions at speed. That was the whole adjustment. No complicated new schemes, no long installation period, no easing her in. Just put her in the starting lineup and let her play basketball the way she actually plays basketball. The New Zealand game showed exactly what that looks like in practice. Early in the first half, Clark was already pushing in transition, finding teammates before the defense could set up, creating clean looks that simply had not been there in the first 2 games. The spacing opened up immediately because defenders had to account for her at speed, and when they did, everyone else got easier shots. It was basketball in its purest, most effective form. Now some detractors will say New Zealand isn't a tough opponent, and a 55-point win doesn't prove the system works against real competition. So let's look at the full tournament numbers instead. Across all 5 games, Clark led Team USA in assists, plus-minus, and efficiency. And she led the asterisk entire tournament in plus-minus and efficiency. Not just her team, every single player from every single country in the field. Those numbers cover every opponent, every game, including the ones where she spent half the game on the bench under Lawson. The argument that the blowout was just a mismatch doesn't really hold up when the data runs across the whole tournament against varied competition. Game 4 against Italy provided further evidence. Tibbetts deployed a 3-guard lineup, putting Clark alongside Kelsey Plum and Paige Buchers. All 3 are capable of handling the ball and making decisions. Italy had no answer for it. USA won by 34 points and the offense genuinely looked fun again. It had pace and personality. The ball moved, the floor was spread, and Clark was operating exactly where she is most dangerous. In space, making reads, creating for others before the defense could rotate. This guard-heavy approach was the bigger stylistic shift Tibbetts brought. It wasn't just a play Clark more adjustment, it was a full philosophy change. Smaller lineups, faster pace, more ball movement, more decisions happening at speed. And that style works specifically because Clark's skill set makes it possible. She's the one who can push it in transition and still make the right read. She is the one who can get into the paint and dish out before the help arrives. The whole system breathes differently when she is running it. Under Lawson, the offense asked Clark to fit into a structure that was already decided. Slow it down, play off the ball, operate within the system. It was a philosophy of constraint. Under Tibbetts, the structure got built around what Clark does naturally. Push pace, make reads, create for others, punish any defense that tries to slow things down. These are 2 completely different starting points, and the results on the scoreboard reflected exactly that difference. By the time the final game of the tournament tipped off, Clark was starting, playing the most minutes on the team, and the wins were stacking up by 30 to 50 points. The tournament MVP conversation was not really a conversation at that point. It was a formality. Let's put a number on it. 14 FIBA world records in 7 days, and she spent most of that time coming off the bench. Let's rewind and track how this tournament played out game by game, because the progression is essential to understanding the magnitude of the shift. Clark comes off the bench, plays limited fragmented minutes. In that limited time, she breaks 5 world records. She posts the highest assist total ever by a USA debutant in a FIBA qualifying game. She posts the highest assists in a debut across the entire tournament's history. Records that had been sitting untouched for decades are gone in a single night by a player who wasn't even starting. Team USA wins, but the offense never really gets going. It is functional, not dominant. Game 2 versus opponent, more of the same. Clark is back on the bench. The offense stays slow and deliberate. More records fall anyway because that is just what Clark does when she is on the floor, defying the system imposed on her. The Puerto Rico game, this is where it all comes to a head. Clark's minutes are cut even further. The team struggles against a box-and-one defense that the coaching staff has no answer for. The team looks stuck. The fans are furious. The post-game press conference is evasive. This is the breaking point. Game 3 versus New Zealand. Tibbetts' first game, the atmosphere shifts. Clark starts. The offense runs through her. USA wins by 55. The team looks liberated. Game 4 versus Italy, Clark runs the backcourt alongside Plum and Buchers in a 3-guard lineup. USA wins by 34. The system is humming. Game 5 final, Clark is the story. She is starting. She is playing the most minutes on the team. The lineup arguments have evaporated. When you zoom into the MVP numbers, you cannot deny Clark's performance. She led Team USA in minutes, points, 2-point field goal percentage, free throws made and attempted, assists, plus-minus, and efficiency. Then she led the entire tournament in plus-minus and efficiency. Every player, every country, the whole field. She's 22 years old, and she just became the youngest player in FIBA qualifying tournament history to win Most Valuable Player. And again, she did this while spending 4 games coming off the bench. So the question that lingers, the question that should haunt the previous coaching staff is this: what do those numbers look like if she starts all 5 games? What if Tibbetts was running the show from Game 1 instead of Game 3? What if Clark was allowed to be the system from the very first tip-off? What she put up while playing a backup role is already historic. The starting role version of that tournament might not even have a comparison point. It might have been the most dominant qualifying performance in FIBA history. But this story is bigger than wins, losses, and even records. Clark's presence shifted the ratings for this tournament on a global scale. Sponsorship conversations shifted. The WNBA's next collective bargaining agreement is being negotiated right now, and Clark's international market value just got documented in a way that is impossible to argue with. The viewership numbers from Puerto Rico, driven by fans tuning in to see her, will be part of the data presented in those negotiations. Teams and sponsors don't get to pretend anymore that her draw is just a domestic thing. It's on the record now, she is a global attraction. And for Indiana Fever fans specifically, this tournament serves as a critical case study. They need to be watching the Stephanie White situation closely. White is Clark's head coach in Indiana heading into the 2026 season. She was part of the staff in Puerto Rico that wanted Clark playing slower and off the ball. She was an architect of the philosophy that was failing so spectacularly that it led to a head coach being removed. This tournament just ran a 5-game live experiment on exactly that question. The first 2 games were under the slow, off-ball, system-first philosophy. The last 3 were under Tibbetts, who went the other direction, player-first, pace-focused. The wins were by 55 and 34 points. The team went from struggling against a box-and-one to blowing out opponents. The results are not subtle. They are not open to interpretation. Every fan who said Clark was being mismanaged was right. Every analyst who looked at the box scores and said the math doesn't add up was right. The coaching change is USA Basketball admitting it out loud without actually saying the words. They saw the problem and they fixed it by removing the person who was causing it. 14 world records, a tournament MVP, and a head coach who quietly disappeared in the middle of the night. None of that is a coincidence. And Clark is 22, she is just getting started. She returns to Indiana with a full WNBA season ahead where she is finally the unquestioned centerpiece. Cara Lawson is gone, her reputation tarnished by a stubborn refusal to adapt. The 14 world records are on the books. The title of youngest FIBA qualifying tournament MVP in history belongs to her. The Indiana Fever head into 2026 with a coaching staff that just watched up close what happens when you do not build around Caitlyn Clark. Stephanie White was right there on that sideline in Puerto Rico. She saw the dysfunction, she saw the frustration, she saw the immediate transformation when the system was flipped, she saw the 55-point wins. She has no excuse not to know what works and what doesn't. So if you watched this tournament and felt vindicated, you should. The fans were right, the numbers were right, the eye test was right. USA basketball eventually figured it out too. The only question that remains is whether the lessons learned in Puerto Rico will carry over to Indiana or whether history will be doomed to repeat itself. Do you think Cara Lawson sabotaged Caitlyn Clark? Was it malicious or merely stubborn incompetence? The silence from USA basketball suggests they know the answer, even if they won't say it out loud.